everyone. So I wanted to test out another type of video. There's actually going to be three because there's three specific picture books I can think of right off the top of my head that I really want to read with you guys and talk about. Two are fat acceptance. One has more to do with gender, but my issues with that one are a bit different than with the fat acceptance books. The one that I really wanted to read to you guys first, unfortunately, I did not get to this video in time. It was returned back, and now someone else has it, and I have to wait 2 weeks before I can get it again. So in the meantime, we're going to cover this other one, and it's called Frances Discovers Possible. And this is a very fat-positive children's picture book. And I want to read it to you guys because these are some of the books that are emerging in children's libraries and stuff, and it's more than just it's more than just representation. Hey, everyone's beautiful, everyone's whatever. It's more than that, because I've seen books, not specifically for fat characters, but I've seen ones with black characters where it's telling just a story that can be a little bit more unique to a black child's experience, particularly young black girls' hair and how it can be styled. And there's been a couple of different stories involving that, and they're really cute. And those are great representation stories. And then there's this other type of children's picture book story where it's not just an experience, a personal experience story. It's not just a love yourself sort of story. It's meant to be didactic in nature and try to teach a particular viewpoint. This isn't Eyes That Kiss in the Corners. This isn't Hair Love. This isn't Stella's Stellar Hair. This is something else. And I'm gonna read it to you guys, and we're gonna kind of analyze it as we go. Frances loved words. She loved words, and she loved Tuesdays. At Frances's school, Tuesdays were word days, and that made Tuesdays the best. Every week, Frances's teacher, Mr. Pruitt, picked one student and let them choose a letter. Their job was to find new words that began with their letter, to share with the class. I actually, just off to the side, I do kind of like this idea a little bit. I feel like it needs to be refined, but that could be a fun vocabulary building exercise. This week, it was Frances's turn, and she had picked the letter P. But first, Mr. Pruitt wanted to review the letters they'd already learned. A is for antelope, Mr. Pruitt started. R is for rainbow, Robert said. T is for trampoline, cried Calliope. E is for, prompted Mr. Pruitt. Elephant, shouted Xiomara. Elevator, suggested Achille. Excellent, Mr. Pruitt winked. What about F? Frog, yelled Samira. Fat, whispered Tabitha. Like Frances, snickered Jericho. Loud enough for everyone to hear. Fat was usually a warm word, like belly rubs for Frances's puppy, or how her giggles felt too big for her mouth during hide and seek, or like cuddling up to read a book with Mama and using Mama's fluffy arms as the best pillow. Tabitha made Fat cold, like the time a hole split Frances's boot and let the puddles inside. Jericho made Frances feel small, like the time she tripped at recess during tag and everyone laughed. So I just want to say though, like, this is meant to appeal to children. Fat in general isn't used as a positive term even now. Like, this is one of those like chronically online takes of fat is a neutral descriptor. Fat it can be a positive word, and while fat can 100% be a neutral descriptor if you want to go that route, it's not something that like the average person who isn't chronically online would feel. Most people, you say that's that person's fat, they're gonna think like it's negative connotations. So this is already, for most children, fat was never a positive word to begin with. So this is already reading weird. Also, it said Tabitha made Fat cold, but if we look at the previous page, he said, what about F? Tabitha whispered fat, which again would suggest that Tabitha knows that fat may not be the nicest word. Jericho, though, was the one that insulted Frances. Tabitha was adding to the conversation. I don't think that if fat is truly a neutral descriptor, the way that it's trying to paint like it had all these warm connotations for Frances, then why is Tabitha so much as saying the word fat an issue? Because it gives nothing to indicate Tabitha's tone other than she whispered it. Mr. Pruitt told Jericho and Tabitha to apologize and offered to jump to Frances's turn to talk. Again, though, Tabitha just said the word fat. I thought there was nothing wrong with the word fat, so why is Tabitha being punished? Jericho was the one that used to, and even so, again, I'm coming at this from the fat acceptance mindset, the fat acceptance rhetoric. If fat is a neutral descriptor, and Tabitha said fat, didn't indicate anybody. Tabitha didn't indicate anybody. Jericho was the one that called Tabitha fat, but if fat is supposed to be something neutral and fine, why did Frances automatically associate it negatively? Why didn't that kick in when maybe they were laughing at her? Or, well, wait, did they describe laughing? Nope, just loud enough for everyone to hear. I mean, it's understandable that the teacher would see it as an insult, but given the type of vocabulary exercise and the responses that we get from the other kids, rainbow, trampoline, elephant, elevator, excellent, and frog, these aren't advanced words per se. And Frances herself looks pretty small. So if Frances had never associated the word negatively before, she would not necessarily have been able to connect the dots that she was being insulted until the teacher maybe noticed it and said no, or maybe some of the kids laughed, or maybe there was some sort of other reaction, but we get no indication of that, which is already confusing the narrative here. But Frances didn't want to stand it in front of everybody now. She started thinking about fat, and she couldn't seem to stop. She thought about fat at lunch. She thought about fat at nap time. She thought about fat when Baba picked her up after school. But here's the thing. Why is she thinking about it so much when she said fat was usually a warm word? It's weird. This whole story is just weird. How was class today? Did you tell everyone about pumpernickel and pudding and porcupines? Baba asked as he gave Frances a hug. Frances shook her head against Baba's soft belly. No? Why not? Frances wasn't sure what to say. She didn't want Baba to know fat was bad. Frances and Baba were both quiet on their walk to the car. Frances, Baba said after they buckled up, I need some fresh air. Could we go to the park? Frances considered. The park was good for thinking. Okay, Baba, Frances said. When Frances and Baba got to the park, he made a beeline for the swings, their favorite spot, but Frances didn't want to pump her legs today. She sat on the closest bench instead. No swings? Frances shook her head and curled her knees to her chest until she was as small as she could be. Normally, I wouldn't think twice about this, but given the general fat acceptance narrative, this feels like something I'll give it to them. This one right here is subtle, but I think it's intentional of her trying to make herself smaller and how she shouldn't. And watch, the next step will be her taking up space. You know what? Me neither. I was just thinking, today is definitely a bench day. Baba and Frances settled in. It was quiet on the bench. Then Baba said, You know, Frances, the Weather Channel thinks it's possible we'll get snow before. Frances's ears perked up. Possible? Frances knew so many P words. But this one felt brand new. Baba? Frances said. What does the word possible mean? Baba tilted his head to the side. What do you think? Frances shrugged. Maybe possible is something like exploring, Baba suggested. Then he held out his hand and whispered, Why don't we go find out? Frances wasn't sure, but she was curious, so she put her hand in Baba's and off they went. Was possible like airplanes hovering in the sky? Could possible be like learning to swim? Was it when you held your breath and jumped? Or did possible look like planting and how it takes a long time to grow? Maybe possible slap, slap, slapped like double dutch and kept you on your toes. Frances thought that possible would be one thing, but suddenly it seemed like a lot of things. There was possible in dandelions and in scooping air into your lungs for a wish. Possible in puppies, in the squishes of their tummies and how they're always ready to play. I don't understand. Like, again, like she had mentioned the fat being connected to the puppy's tummy. What is with this? I don't understand. I don't remember any particular, like, it to me it's not like a general quality of puppies to be fat. Am I wrong? Have I just looked at puppies differently than anyone else? Like, it's weird. Possible, like the wind dancing leaves to a new place. Possible made Frances feel warm and big, like fat, before Tabitha made it cold and Jericho made it small. Possible made her want to take up space, there it is, and share her words, and wish and dance and play. Because if puppies and wishes could be possible, maybe Frances was possible too. This is such a confusing narrative. What the fuck does this even mean? Is it just me, or are they, like, really trying hard to... I know what the kids like, and I know the books that they like to read. One, the art style isn't great. Like, it's not terrible. And it could have its own charm, but the story ruins it. And most kids, by the time, like... This is a pretty long story for kindergarten without anything really happening. So kindergarten was already out for, like, interest level. First grade maybe, but first grade's gonna get lost with how long it's fucking taking to get to the fucking point. And by the time they get to, and I guarantee first and second grade know what possible means. So this whole line is mildly confusing to me. I guarantee it would be confusing to them, because it's like, this isn't, like, why didn't he just tell her what possible means? You know? Frances reached up and tugged on Baba's sleeve. Baba, I think I'm ready for the swings, said Frances. And she was. Oh, that's it? That's it? Okay, granted. Like, what the fuck was this even all about? This was a boring-ass story. I previewed this story, like, briefly. I previewed this story. I previewed up until they were, like, on the bench. I should have looked all the way. I'm sorry, I didn't realize that this was gonna just fucking end there. That's so boring. There's an author's note. I grew up a poor, skinny, unpopular white kid in a single-parent household, and almost every book I read as a child reflected some part of my own story back to me in the main characters. But as I got older and my body grew with me, I often didn't see myself in the books I read or movies I watched. If I did, it was usually as a joke or at best a plucky best friend. It took years for me to learn to accept my body and see myself as someone who could still be the protagonist of a story, and to begin to write those stories myself. The character of Frances was born out of my desire for all kids of all body types to see, at an early age, fat characters portrayed as people worthy of taking up space in stories. That's so, like, the whole taking up space narrative is fucking stupid. I'm sorry, but it is. In everyday scenarios and the biggest dreams we can imagine, except you did nothing here. I was also eager to portray a fat parent who is positive, supportive, and reassuring to their fat child in subtle ways, because I know firsthand the hurt that can occur when self-esteem issues are passed down from parent to child. Finally, it was important to me to give Frances quiet permission to sit with her emotions when she was confronted with bullying, while allowing her space to find her way through those tough feelings and into the place of possibility. I hope that Frances helps readers discover the same sense of possibility for themselves. So basically, you were trying to heal your inner child with this story, which is fine. But that means it's meant, like, I'm actually kind of surprised that this was published. I'm genuinely surprised. Like, who published this? What was the publisher? Because this was this was just a nothing story. There was nothing to this story. Abrams Books for Young Readers, I guess, is the publisher. This was a nothing story. The art style isn't terrible, but it's not particularly great. And the narrative is just a big nothing. Like, there's so much contradiction here. Fat was usually warm, but somehow Tabitha just uttering the word fat made it cold. And Jericho made it small. Whatever the fuck that means. And then so she becomes obsessed with it. Again, this would work better if there was a little bit more of a hint as to what caused her to associate that way, since it had such positive meanings to her before. If it had positive meanings to her before, someone just saying that stuff, it wouldn't automatically click. The kids laughing at her would be something to tip her off. The teacher saying that's not nice would tip her off, but we don't get that. I mean, he makes them apologize, but that's after she's already been hurt. So that doesn't work. And the whole possible motif thing here doesn't fucking work either. What the fuck does any of this mean? I don't understand how this was published. And this was on a list of good, fat, positive books, too. And here's the thing for vaccines. You want to focus on fat, positive characters. I don't even necessarily have a problem with just representation of fat kids doing things in books. I don't actually inherently have an issue with that. But at least have a decent fucking story. This was nothing. This was a big, fat, nothing sandwich. Like, it was stupid. And this very nebulous talk that's supposed to be like this empowering talk of possible would not resonate with kids at this level. Like, this is entirely too nebulous. It does not work. And I'm sorry, I'm not one to usually critique this harshly on someone's story, but, like, this is geared towards kids, and it doesn't work on so many fucking levels. So many levels. So it ends with her on the swings. Okay. It did not work for me. But what did you think? What did you think of this nothing book? Let me know in the comments down below. Sorry this wasn't the best video, but that's part of this month, is both kind of a treat for you guys, but also a little bit of experimentation with different formats or with different types of videos. So let me know what you thought of this book and this video in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you next time.